Hello and welcome back everyone. Today we are taking a look at the Rhythm from Axiom discs. If you haven't heard of the Rhythm before, it is classified as a semi-understable fairway driver with a speed of 7, glide 5, turn -2, and a fade of 1. But let's go ahead, jump on in, take a look at the profile of the Rhythm. The first thing that I noticed right away, this is a very slender fairway driver. Not only is it very shallow, but it also has an incredibly flat flight plate, at least in this Neutron plastic. But if you're not a huge fan of the very slender profile, you can take a look for the Fission plastic. That did have a little bit more dome to it. So if you're like me and you like domier style discs when it comes to your backhand grip because it fills the hand, then I would suggest looking for that Fission plastic. And for those of you that prefer flatter discs for forehand, well, then the Neutron is right for you. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the flight. When thrown on a hyzer, depending on your arm speed, you're going to get a little bit of a flip up. It is slightly understable. Again, this is all arm dependent. For slower arms, you're not going to get nearly as much flip, you're not going to get nearly as much turn, and as your arm speed increases, that when you're going to notice this becoming much more of an understable driver. However, for those of us with medium, slower arms, hyzer, it's going to hold the hyzer the entire way. It's not really going to deviate very much. When thrown flat, you'll notice a little bit of turn in the mid-flight, but then it'll quickly check up and then have a slight finish at the very end. And then once you do start putting the Rhythm onto those anhyzer lines, that's when you're going to get these really nice kind of effortless S-curving flex shots, which is made possible by the Rhythm's mild resistance to torque in the early and mid portions of its flight. That also means that if you do put the Rhythm on those more exaggerated turnover lines, then you're going to be able to get the Rhythm to hold nice controlled turnovers all the way to the ground if you throw it low, or if you throw it really high in the sky for like a sky anhyzer, it'll hold that angle for the majority of its flight before just at the very end it'll check up and just have a slight hyzer finish. Now, I did mention earlier that overall the Rhythm has just a really mild resistance in the early and mid-flight to torque. Well, what really surprises me is usually discs like that are not great for forehand. But that isn't the case for the Rhythm. As long as I give it a little bit of a hyzer angle, it's going to get some flip up, and depending on how close to flat I throw it, it'll get a little bit more turn. But I can always trust that it's just going to have a gentle amount of turn, it's always going to check up, and then have a nice forward penetrating finish at the end of its flight. It's not going to turn into an incidental roller, which means no matter what course I'm on, whether it's wide open or densely wooded, because I have both backhand and forehand trust in the Rhythm, I can really make a lot of good use out of it. Alright, let's take the Rhythm out on the course and see what I can do with it. For this first hole, this is a very wide open hole. For a righty, it's just a stock hyzer. For a lefty like me, I can go with either a forehand or a backhand turnover, whichever I'm feeling more comfortable with at the time. In this instance, I opt for the backhand turnover, and committing to that line, you can see the Rhythm holds the turn nearly all the way to the basket until the very end it just checks up and has a soft landing. Now, this next hole is a little bit more tricky, as about halfway down the fairway you do have a narrow gap that you have to hit. With the basket tucked on the right hand side, this shot is perfect for that lefty slight anhyzer flex, where I know I can start on a little bit of an anhyzer, the Rhythm will hold it through the gap, level itself out, and then swing its way back to the basket. Now, I mentioned I can trust the Rhythm on a forehand. Well, here you've got that bush on the left-hand side and a wall of trees on the right. I can't necessarily reach the basket, so I'm going for a placement shot, and the Rhythm on a forehand works perfectly to throw it down the middle, get it to flip up flat, and then trust that it's going to fight its way back before it reaches that wall of trees. So far, we've been seeing the Rhythm in the Neutron plastic. However, it does also come in Fission, which mentioned earlier does have a little bit more dome to it. And in addition to the feel, the Fission plastic, particularly in heavier weights, can be a much more trustworthy option, especially if you're looking for it to fight the wind. This is about a 10 to 15 mile an hour headwind. Yes, it gets a little bit of turn, the wind plays with it a bit, but it does check up and still has a hyzer finish instead of fully turning over. And then when it comes to forehand, I can really rip into this at 100% and trust it's not going to turn over into a roller. The heavyweight Fissions just add a good amount of torque resistance to the Rhythm. The only thing that I wish is that the Fission plastic was flat, so that way I could have that for forehands, and the Neutron a little bit domier, so that way I could have that for backhands. Okay, so I've talked about the differences between the Neutron and Fission, but let's actually see the differences with the Lefty lines. With the Neutron, very straight, little bit of turn in the mid-flight, and then just towards the very end, it checks up and hyzers out. The Fission follows the line pretty closely, but it checks up sooner. It doesn't get nearly as much drift in the mid-flight, checks up a little bit sooner, and has a little bit of a harsher finish. And then when it comes to the forehand, very similar flight with the Neutron, very straight, turn, and then a hyzer finish. And with the Fission, again, it does still get a little bit of turn, but you can clearly see it check up earlier before it has that slightly stronger finish. So if I had to recommend the Rhythm to someone for slower arms, I would say go for Neutron, lighter weight if you can find it. And for faster arms, I would say look for a near max weight Fission. That's going to add a bit more torque resistance. So whether backhand or forehand, that extra torque resistance is really going to help out. Overall, I have to say I like the shot variety you get out of the Rhythm. If you need to hit a tunnel, Rhythm can do that. If you need to hold a turnover line, it can do that too. It also has just enough torque resistance to be viable for forehanding shots, so when you're in the woods, you can really shape a lot of different shots with that forehand, and just trust that it's not going to turn over too much into a roller. Overall, very good fairway driver. I would definitely recommend the Rhythm to almost any player out there. Well, that is all I have for you. I hope you all enjoyed the video and found it useful. As always, please subscribe if you haven't already, smash that like button, get those YouTube algorithms going. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you all so much. And additionally, if you want to try the Rhythm for yourself, be sure to visit GreatLakesDisc.com. Go pick up yours. Use promo code LEFTY at checkout to save yourself 10% off your order. I very much appreciate all your support. Until the next one, keep banging chains.